All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming here today to our event on the German elections. So the event is called The Day After, obviously, because we had the German elections yesterday. And now we have a pretty much rough outlook on what the composition of the parliament will look like and what the balance of power will look like, what kind of a coalition constellation that we're looking at, and also many other issues to discuss. My name is Senem Aydın-Düzgit. I am the director of the Istanbul Policy Center and professor of international relations at the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at Sabancı University. And I'm going to be moderating the panel and the session today. And our session will be live streamed on Zoom on our YouTube channel. We've got all this fancy equipment now, so we're trying to figure it out, see how it works. So it's going to be a bit of a test case with this panel as well to see if it works properly or not. Hopefully it does. And today I'm joined with a stellar panel of experts from different walks of life, both policy and academia, think tank world, to tell us more about the results of the German elections and what this means for the future of German domestic politics in the next couple of months and years, but also Europe at large and its policies and foreign policy. So on my left-hand side, we have Heinrich Kreft, who is our current IPC Mercator Senior Fellow, and who used to be a German ambassador in many different countries in the past. And so he brings into the room an extensive background and expertise on German politics and foreign policy. So thank you so much for joining us today, Heinrich. And then we have Ebru Turhan, our friend and colleague, who's a faculty member at Turkish-German University, and who's an academic who works specifically on German politics, but also Germany's policies in the European Union and Germany's relationship with Turkey as well. And I have to note that she also used to be an IPC Mercator Fellow. I can't remember the year now, Ebru, which year was that? It's been a while.
2014, oh my God.
Well, there you go.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
But I'm so happy that we can keep this network going, you know, beyond many years.
Yeah, I'm still alive. Yeah.
Oh. Great that you are, and you're with us. And then we have Çiğdem Hocam, who is Çiğdem Nas, who is the Secretary General of the Economic Development Foundation, and who's also a professor of international relations at Yıldız Technical University. And Çiğdem Hoca also at İKV has worked with us at IPC on various occasions where we published policy briefings and reports on Turkey's relations with the European Union, but also Turkey's potential adaptation to the European climate agenda and Green Deal, etc. So İKV has been a long-term partner of IPC on these matters for many years. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, we have Johanna. Wietschel, right? So I'm just checking just to see that I pronounce it correctly. Sorry, Johanna, for massacring your surname. I hope I haven't. But Johanna is also an IPC Mercator fellow with us this year. And her work focuses on climate policy. So she's going to focus a bit more on what these elections mean for Germany's climate agenda, and in relation to that, of course, to the wider, broader European climate agenda as well. So, without further ado, I am going first to Heinrich, if I may.
Yeah.
Would you like I think you have slides,
yes,
right?
I do. It's
okay.
Better to
it's good to have the slides so that we also have on the screen the results and what they look like.
All right. Well, Senem, thank you very much for the introduction. I just came back from Berlin, but you probably were in the same way able to follow the events of last night. The different screens were competing with each other. Who were closer with the final results? Well, but it ended only 2 o'clock in the morning when we finally knew what we would have to expect. Well, let's look first a bit back to the last elections, 21. You know, this was not a regular election, this was a snapshot, a snap election. We had the SPD winning the last election, so that's why Olaf Scholz became chancellor in 21. Friedrich Merz was not yet the chancellor candidate at the time. This was still Armin Laschet at the time. The CDU-CSU came in as number 2, which was a surprise after so many years of Angela Merkel, who had easily brought the CDU-CSU into first place. So it was a surprise that the SPD was able to form a coalition. The SPD formed a coalition together with the Greens, with Robert Habeck was one of the 2 heads of the Greens at the time. Annalena Baerbock, the foreign minister, was the chancellor candidate at the time. They came in as number 3, and number 4 was Christian Lindner with the FDP, and they founded the so-called traffic light coalition. The first time that we had a coalition of 3 parties, which is not exactly correct because the union, the CDU-CSU are 2 parties, but they always counted as one. So it was clear this was going to be a much more unstable coalition from the beginning, though they had a good start, and with a lot of energy they started into the government. But of course you all know that the environment changed very quickly. This was 2001, 2002. Today it's the 24th of February, 3 years ago. Russia attacked Ukraine, so this was on their plate very early in their government, with the results on the energy, etc., etc. The AfD, Alice Weidel, one of the 2 heads of the AfD, came in with 10% of the vote 3.5 years ago. And the left, this is a specialty of the German election law. They didn't make it via their percentage point, because we have a threshold of 5%. They didn't make it. They didn't make the 5%, just 4.9. But they managed to win 3 constituencies directly. And in that case, all the secondary, the second votes are counted, are transformed into seats. So they came up with 38 seats at the time, and you see below it's 28. So they lost 11 seats, and this is because of her. Because Sarah Wagenknecht, she founded the Bewegung Sarah Wagenknecht, left the left party, and with her current 10 seats in the parliament, she formed a new group. They both didn't get, of course, fraction status, parliamentary group status. That's according to the parliamentary rules. So that should be enough as a view back. A few words on the electoral system. So it's now for the first time that we have 630 seats in the German parliament, and this is fixed. This is fixed for the first time, because in the past we always had what we called overhang mandates. So when all those who won their constituencies had their place in the parliament. But after a while, this was ruled unfair by the Constitutional Court. So the other parties got also extra votes, extra seats in the parliament. So nobody knew before and during elections how many seats would actually end up in parliament. So in 21 we had quite a few work to be done in the parliament to get everybody seated. But it was the biggest parliament in the free world. So of course the Chinese National Congress is bigger, but we all know it's not freely elected. So what's the electoral system in Germany? We have a mixed member proportional electoral system. the voter has 2 votes still until today. The first vote is used directly to elect the candidate in their own constituency, and most parties field a candidate in every constituency. But of course, only one wins that constituency, and this person in the past directly went to Berlin into the Bundestag. But this is no longer the case, because now it has to match the number of the second vote, die Zweitstimme. So if we, we have a few cases, for example, in Bavaria, the CSU, they managed to win basically all direct seats. But in percentage point, they get less seats as they have won as constituencies. So this is going to be a problem in the future, and we will have a discussion on that in Germany, definitely. I'm sure some will go to the Constitutional Court, because people elected in their constituencies will not be represented in the parliament. Okay, so the second vote is the most important one. It was always the most important one, but it's now even more important because of the reform. To enter the Bundestag, a party must either get 5% of the nationwide second vote or win 3 constituencies via first vote. So this was the case with the left in 2021. So now to the results of yesterday. So the winner was, well, the CDU-CSU, called the Union, with 28.8%, added 4.4 to its result 3.5 years ago. But it's the second worst result of the CDU-CSU since the founding of the Federal Republic of Germany. The AfD is the biggest winner, which doubled, nearly doubled, or exactly doubled their result from 21, came in as second with 20.8% of the vote. The SPD fell from first to third place with a loss of 9.3 to a result of 16.4. The Greens more or less were stable. They crawled back since the breakup of the coalition in November, but still lost 3.5% and came in as number 3, which is important. And another big winner is the left. The left, which already had started a special campaign called Strategy Silberlocke. So they, in the past, they had always managed, like in 21, to win at least three constituencies directly. So because of that, they made it into the parliament, and they were betting, they were putting their 3 all men, most known people into specific constituencies where they had a good opportunity to win. They all won, but it wasn't necessary because they easily jumped over the 5% threshold. And a surprise, in both ways, the Bewegung Wagenknecht is just a year old. It was founded early last year, participated in the European elections, won big in 3 regional elections last year, but all in Eastern German elections. And they were stable, be above 5% for a long time, until the left really picked up. And this is to be debated, what were the reasons for that. And they came up very, very, very, very close to the 5% hurdle. The FDP is the biggest loser of the traffic light coalition. They lost more than 7%, and they were kicked out of the Bundestag. And Lindner, the head of the party, has already mentioned last night that he will not, that he will retire from politics. So, what does this translate into? It translates into seats they are distributed among those parties who made it into parliament. So, so this is still the result, yeah, the vorläufiges Endergebnis of 4 o'clock in the morning, where the CDU received 208 seats plus 11, and the SPD 120 seats minus 68, but together they have 38, and this is enough to form a government. And well, let's go back, and we will definitely have well, the only possible and realistic coalition is the coalition of the CDU-CSU together with the SPD, because it's not there would be not enough seats for the CDU-CSU together with the Greens, and this would be the only second option, because the CDU Merz has made it clear there will be no coalition with the right-wing party, with the AfD. So this is the only option if the BSW would have made it into the parliament. We would have had the necessity to form a coalition out of three parties, or if you count the CSU extra, out of 4 parties. Then we would have had the only option to form a coalition out of CDU-CSU, SPD, and Greens. And so 2 from the former traffic light coalition together with the CDU-CSU. We have one specialty here, the Südschleswiger Wählerverband. This is a specialty in Germany. It's a minority of Danes in the northern part of Germany, and they are not bound to the threshold. So they have to get as many votes to come up to 1 seat. So that's why they can make it and will make it. It's already the 3rd time that they make it into the Bundestag. The FDP is fielded in this chart because they were in the last parliament with 21 seats, and they are now out of the parliament. So let's look at the map. So the color of the CDU-CSU is black. So that's the old Western Germany is colored basically in black, dark black, or a little lighter black, meaning the CDU-CSU has basically won in all constituencies in the old western part of Germany. Blue is the AfD. So you see that the AfD has basically won all constituencies in the old eastern part of Germany, old GDR, with very few pockets in the southern part of Berlin. This is my constituency, and this was a very interesting one because Olaf Scholz was the direct candidate, and also Annalena Baerbock was a direct candidate, and also the former Secretary General of the FDP was a candidate, and Olaf Scholz won this seat, so he will of course have to resign as Chancellor, but he mentioned he will take up his seat as Member of Parliament. Well, let's look a little more in detail. So where were the different parties strongest and weakest? So surprise, surprise, the CDU-CSU was strongest im Hochsauerlandkreis. You probably all know where Friedrich Merz comes from the Sauerland. So it's not a surprise that he did well in the Sauerland. And they just got 9.3% of the vote in Berlin, Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg. So this is a huge difference between the constituency where they performed best and worst. Again, the AfD very strong in the east. Görlitz, nearly 50%. Nearly 50%. This is a town close to the border with with Poland, and their worst constituency was in Cologne with just 6%. With the SPD, they have their stronghold in Lower Saxony. Most principal figures of the SPD come from Lower Saxony, Scholz, Pistorius, and many more. And they have their stronghold in Lower Saxony, in North Westphalia, in the northern part of Hessen, and in Rhenania-Palatinate, the Saarland. The Greens have done best also in the western part of Germany. The best in my hometown, Münster, with 26.6%, and the worst in the eastern part of Germany, in the Erzgebirge. This is close to the border with the Czech Republic. Okay, the left won Berlin. The left was the strongest party in all constituencies in Berlin. So the biggest win was in Berlin, Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg, with over 31%. Okay, I cut the worst. Sorry for that. The BSW, well, it's split from the left, so it's clear their basis is eastern part of Germany. So they did best in the eastern part of Germany. A little better in the west, in the Saar. You know that Sarah Wagenknecht is married to Oskar Lafontaine. Oskar Lafontaine is from the Saarland, and he was prime minister of the Saarland. So there is a reason why she did and her party did better in the Saar area. The FDP also more an old West German party, much better in the old West German part than in the eastern part, the best in Düsseldorf, but they lost everywhere. So this is, some colors are not viewed in a good way. But well, what I should mention, we had an extremely high voter participation. The voter turnout was over 83%, so the highest since German unification. And quite a number of votes came from those who didn't vote last time. So the biggest chunk of the non-voters went to the AfD. And we always had more no-voters in the eastern part of Germany than western part of Germany. So it's clear AfD is stronger in the eastern part of Germany. Higher voter turnout would lead directly to a better performance of the AfD. But at the end, all the parties profited from those who did not vote last time. But of course, there were always voter migration between all parties. So there were so strong arrow from the SPD going to the CDU-CSU, and there was a strong arrow from the FDP going to the CDU-CSU. And Friedrich Merz, he actually campaigned against the FDP, and probably this was conducive to push them below the 5% hurdle. So yes, for the first time, the Grand Coalition is no longer a Grand Coalition. Doesn't have more than 50% of the vote. They have more than 50% of the seats, yes, because we have a substantial number of votes below 5%, and the seats are distributed among those parties represented in parliament. But you see, the SPD has its lowest voter turnout, and the CDU has its second lowest voter turnout. So it's really a fundamental shift in voting behavior in Germany this time. The extremes on both sides have profited, and with the regional differences. So particularly if you look at the AfD has basically become the Workers' Party and the party of those who are unemployed. So 38% of the workers have voted for the AfD, 22% for the CDU-CSU, and only 12% for the SPD. So the former Workers' Party has been moved from first to third place. And among those unemployed, also the AfD has done best. But also here you see the left with 13% has done much better than their overall turnout. So I will be brief. This is a chart from the FAZ I took in this morning. I saw it during the flight. And their analysis is that why did people vote for the AfD? And in the first two elections where they made it into the parliament, 17 and 21, it was basically, in 17 definitely it was the protest against other parties. But already last time it was a substantial number, it was a bigger number who said, well, we are convinced that this party is representing my values, my belief better than all the others. And this has even increased in 2025. So this is the last chart. Of course, migration was a very important topic. But this is also an interesting chart. Most voters see that the problem with the high inflation, migration numbers is a result of CDU-CSU policy. And more than half of those who voted for the CDU-CSU believe that. And so this is also an interesting thing which will definitely translate into the coalition negotiations because the CDU-CSU with Merz has a very different position than the SPD and the old coalition. So this will be a thorny issue during the coalition talks. But I stop here now. I hope I gave you enough to chew on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. And now we have a wonderful overview of the results and why and what we have today. And now I'm going to turn to Çiğdem Hocam, to you.
Thank you.
To tell us a bit more about what these elections mean for the European Union and Europe at large. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the invitation. I will talk more about what we can interpret from the results of the elections in terms of their impact on major policies and also European integration. I won't cover all the parties, but the most sort of leading parties out as a result of the elections. I think, as we may all know, these elections were very critical, which also I think we can also detect from the high percentage of voter turnout. They were not only critical for Germany, for German politics, but also for the European Union, because from the point of view of European integration, the EU is also going through a quite difficult process, both in terms of its internal reforms and also the major challenges facing European integration. From the point of view of the European Union, we can talk about some dilemmas and some challenges for the future. And here, of course, the results of the German elections will make an important impact. So first of all, we can say that Germany's leadership role within the European Union is, of course, very critical. And for a number of years now, especially during this coalition period, we see that this leadership was quite reluctant within the European Union, and the EU lacked decisive leadership from Germany. And also because of the results of the European Parliament elections and also the destabilization in France, this sort of classical Franco-German duopoly or leadership was quite lacking in European integration. And the rise of populist parties throughout much of Europe, and especially both in France and in Germany, we could say also led to some doubts about the future direction of Europe. And at the same time, of course, we had the major reports in last year, the Letta report and the Draghi report, which actually maybe in short told us that what we need in this age of competition, geopolitical rivalry is not less Europe, but more Europe, more European integration in areas which have been left out. The revision, modernization of the single market, and also a union in terms of capital union, innovation, closing the innovation gap, also directing investments in more effective areas, etc. So there was a dilemma where inside the member states we had an increase of sovereignist movements, increase in nationalist movements, but at the EU level what we needed was more integration, more supranationalism, or at least transnationalism. So Germany's direction was very important in sort of breaking this dilemma for the future of the European Union. Then, of course, one very important factor which we are living through is, of course, the change in the United States. I said that the United States has always been sort of seen as a supporter of European integration or a security provider with Europe. And in the recent period with the war in Ukraine, we have seen that NATO was revitalized with the entry of two new countries. However, what we see is just the opposite, that the United States became, we can maybe see it as a transition from a security provider to the United States as the great disruptor. So they are not only maybe withdrawing from their commitments, but they are also actively trying to dismantle European integration through disinformation and through some intervention, support for the IFD, etc. So this is also something which is, I think, very different, very challenging, which we have not seen in the recent period. So, of course, this brings to the fore our definition of Atlanticism. For example, we have mostly seen the CDU as an Atlanticist political party, but now it doesn't have any meaning. What do we mean by Atlanticist? Because we no longer have this strong transatlantic dimension. So this also requires a very radical change in the CDU, which we have seen. I will just quote Mr. Merz in a moment. As you may also see on Twitter, he made some remarks about this changing status of the United States. So we will have to see whether Germany will also make this transition from Atlanticism to a maybe more Europeanist position. So that's also a major challenge. Security from the United States. So we are now talking about the United States no longer as an ally, but the Europe trying to maintain the security not only against Russia or China, but now the United States has also become an interventionist, disrupting country. So things are changing rapidly. Defense against Russia, because we also see that there have been some news about the withdrawal of United States troops from the Baltic states, from Eastern Europe, which also creates a power vacuum, maybe a security gap, which has to be filled by the European Union. So this is also a challenge. And also China. I have seen some comments whether this new sort of process where Trump is more friendly with Putin, etc. There is a sort of a convergence, whether this may also lead Europe towards China, whether we can see maybe some sort of cooperation with China, especially in issues like trade, etc. rebuilding the Franco-German axis and widening it. And we may also say that maybe the Franco-German axis, as it was before, is no longer maybe relevant for Europe. Of course it is relevant, but it has to be strengthened, it has to be widened, it has to be maybe redefined, reconstructed. And of course, now maybe with Germany, if Friedrich Merz will become the chancellor, he talks about revitalizing the Franco-German axis. But of course, the French position is also very critical because Macron is not really standing on very stable roots at the moment because of the rise of Le Pen's party. So we see that there is also some tension there. The socio-economic model is also very important, of course, where we had for 2 years now there is a slowdown of growth in Germany, and basically we see that some of the parties like the AfD are actually accusing the green transition from creating this slowdown. So they are maybe advocating a return to fossil fuels, a return to the previous policies. But of course it's deeper than that. Of course there has been a process which has been started with the European Green Deal, the green transition, and this also requires major new investments, major changes, both in areas such as, for example, new electricity grid, increased investments into renewable energies, etc. So this also, I think, requires maybe a rethink, a modernization of the socio-economic model. And here we also have, of course, a lot of questions about the future of the social model, welfare policies. And we see that on the right, both in the CDU and in the AfD, we see that they are also trying to dismantle such areas like unemployment benefits, etc. So we will see maybe a more sort of a reduction of the welfare benefits, which will be maybe directed to new areas of productivity. Resilience and sustainability are also other issues with the European Green Deal, whether or not the German economy will be a leading force in this green transition. And together with that, of course, digitalization, the issue areas such as, for example, artificial intelligence, digital productivity, the startups, high technology startups, that's also another important area where the European Union and Germany are lagging behind some of their competitors. So we will see whether or not in the new period there will be a acceleration of the digital agenda in both Germany and in the European Union. And also, of course, there are other issues related with the Eastern dimension, Eastern Europe, future of Ukraine, especially now we see the start of talks for the future of Ukraine, and what will be the EU's position will be extremely critical, whether they will have a say in the future of Ukraine, whether there will be some maybe missions which will be sent by the European Union to secure the new borders in Ukraine, and whether the issue of membership, EU membership of Ukraine will be able to take place in the near future. So this also requires some very critical decisions to be made. So it is a huge, let's say, agenda. And when we look at the major parties, their approaches to these issues, of course, we see, first of all, a decision or a decisive movement towards either a more federal or a more intergovernmental European Union, a EU of states, or a more supranational, transnational integration process. So the results of the elections and the new government will be, I think, very important with which direction it will go. A larger European Union will also require maybe some decisions about the institutional reform of the European Union, because as Olaf Scholz has said in, I think, 2022, that enlargement is good. It's a geopolitical necessity, but under the present circumstances, it will be very difficult for the EU to enlarge if it does not really undergo a major structural reform process. So this will also be very important. Another issue area is, of course, migration and free movement issues. As we have seen, Germany has reinstated border controls in the internal borders, and they intend to prolong this, as we see. The CDU, I think, intends to prolong the internal border checks. So this may also be detrimental for the future of the area of freedom, security and justice in the European Union, the Schengen area. The new government's position will be very critical. Germany's military position and European security. Here, of course, both the AfD and the CDU has talked about strengthening the army, strengthening the defense capabilities, and making major investments. But this also requires maybe a rethink about the debt brake issue, which has brought down the previous government. So whether or not we will see some more flexible approach to government expenditure. We have seen that although Friedrich Merz has talked about respecting this debt brake, he said that there may be some reform if it requires major investment. And the AfD also said that they are against fiscal reform, but if it is necessary in issues like defense expenditure, then they may think about it. So we will have to also see maybe a rethink about this major issue if Germany also aims to contribute to European security. And also these issues that I have talked about, competitiveness, the rivalry with China, sustainability and digitalization issues will be very important. So I will just, not to take too much time, I will look at the first party, the CDU-CSU, and also the probably Chancellor Friedrich Merz. So when we look at both his speeches and the campaign sort of points, we see that he talked about placing Germany at the center of European Union decision-making once more, reclaiming, let's say, the leadership position. And he said that he will give support for a more integrated Europe. So in terms of, for example, modernization of the single market, and also rekindling the union in areas such as energy, telecommunications, defense sector, capital markets, issues which are also elaborated in the Draghi report. And then we see this characterization placing Germany from a sleeping middle power to a leading middle power. So we see that the new chancellor is also very much ready to take on more leadership position, a more active position in the international system. So this reluctance that Germany had in leadership position, we don't know. Of course, it would depend on the coalition, the internal balances in the coalition, but it may also change that Germany may adopt a more active position in the international system, recommitting to free trade and safeguarding transatlantic relations. Of course, now we see a change in this tone about the transatlantic relations. Also, we see that there may be some sort of tension between Friedrich Merz and the European Commission President von der Leyen. They come from the same political family, but they have their differences. They had their differences. I think von der Leyen was closer to Merkel, so we may see tension, but they will hopefully develop a working relationship if also Germany supports the reforms that the current Commission plans to sort of put into action. Another important issue is in terms of the economy. We see that Merz supports decreasing regulation, which is also on the agenda of the European Commission. So creating a more business-friendly, let's say, environment, and also cutting red tape, deregulating the economy. So this may be, of course, difficult because maybe there may be some resistance from the other parties or from the general public, but I think the business sector will support this initiative. And also, of course, the relationship with China will be critical, and this issue of joint borrowing for European projects, especially in areas such as defense. We have seen that Germany was quite reluctant in the past. There was a period where during COVID, Merkel also agreed to joint borrowing, but this will continue to be a very challenging issue because also borrowing creates, of course, a lot of sort of, we could say, fragility also for European economy, high levels of borrowing. Also, we see In addition to this deregulation, what we see is reduction of energy prices. Energy is, of course, a major issue, and also lowering of taxes. The future of energy will be very important. Whether or not maybe there may be a return to nuclear power, maybe again may come to the agenda. And Friedrich Merz also talked about abolishing the German due diligence law, or maybe flexing it. This will also be very much related with the future of the European Green Deal. A sovereign AI cloud applications, Merz also tries to accelerate the German economy's adaptation to the digital agenda. So this has been sort of a lagging behind Germany, especially during the Merkel era. We have seen that digitalization was a bit neglected, we could say. Maybe in this new era we will see new direction in digitalization. And debt break will be again another major issue, which will be maybe part of the discussions in the formation of the coalition. In terms of the security system, we also see that CDU promotes limiting unemployment benefits and more support to those seeking employment. Active labor market integration policies will be it is supported. Here again, with the transatlantic relationship, I think this is very, very important. Friedrich Merz talked about reviving a free trade deal, which has been dead with the United States, but at the moment it seems very unlikely. And he said that we shouldn't be a dwarf against Trump, we shouldn't back away from Trump, and we should sort of hold our position against Trump. And he also talked about the reviving the Franco-German partnership, but there have been some differences over the Mercosur deal, etc. They have to sort of resolve these differences. And this is basically what he said just recently. It was on Twitter, so I also refer to it. He said that we have to strengthen Europe as quickly as possible so that we achieve independence from the United States. So this is, I think, something which the EU needs to hear from a political leader. Of course, there has been, since 30 or 40 years, there has been a debate about that, but now it is at the door, or maybe just the door has been broken and it is now in, and the Europeans have to respond to that. So he said that, but after the latest statements by Donald Trump last week, it is clear that the Americans, at any case, these Americans, this administration, mostly don't care about the fate of Europe, so we have to be independent. So this is basically something maybe it may be difficult for him to say, but there is a realization at least. But of course, taking the necessary steps will be much more difficult, maybe, or much, but at least we have seen some change. And also in terms of migration, maybe also very much relevant for Turkey relations also. We have already seen this shift in migration policy, but we may say that this is becoming more radical. And also with the AfD having a very high level of representation in the parliament, also they will, of course, I think, although they will not be in the government, they will be in a position to influence, especially migration policies. So I won't go into the details, but basically a very unfriendly policy towards asylum, maybe increasing the number of safe countries, and if possible, sending the asylum seekers to a third country and continuing the processes there. Also limiting social benefits, changing the dual citizenship law, and maybe reversing to the former law. And at the same time, while there is this very strict approach to migration, especially for asylum seekers, there is, of course, the need to integrate foreign professional people, especially with qualifications that are required by the labor market. So here they talked about a digital work and stay agency, a one-stop shop for recruitment, job placement for these people with high qualifications. So they may seem a bit maybe paradoxical, because in a society which increasingly becomes anti-immigration, then it may be difficult actually to attract people with abilities, but this will be needed more and more with the aging population. So this will be also another dilemma. In terms of foreign policy, one issue was related with the defense spending. Germany, I think, has already fulfilled this 2% rule, but with the ending of this special fund which was created for Ukraine, now they will have to maybe invest further, and maybe now we are talking about 5%. Merz talked about a nuclear umbrella and maybe sharing the nuclear umbrella with France, but again, this may be again a very difficult issue. And he talked about support for Ukraine, and especially maybe even a more sort of influential role in the future of Ukraine. So we will also see this. In terms of, Johanna will talk about climate and environment, but we may see maybe not a total dismantling, of course, of the green agenda, but there may be some back steps, or there may be some more flexible sort of solutions. For example, they support lifting the EU's planned combustion engine ban. Now we have the omnibus regulation, which may also streamline these corporate sustainability laws in the European Union, and we see a trend in Germany that this green transition maybe has to be sort of made more flexible, and some more time need to be given for a transition process. When we look at AfD, of course, we also see much more radical agenda regarding migration, and the idea of remigration has been introduced, which has been quite controversial, sending the asylum seekers back, closing the asylum paradise down, sending the Syrians back, lifting any kind of sort of reintegration schemes for Afghan refugees, etc., toughening the rules about residency and nationality, and reintroducing the ethnic basis of citizenship policy may also be seen. Of course, they will not be in the government as far as we know, but still, of course, they will be a huge presence in the parliament, we could say. Major restructuring of the army, and climate skepticism will also be maybe some of the important policy preferences of the AfD. And their policy against Russia is also well known. De-escalation of tensions and a solution of the war in Ukraine. Reclaiming sovereignty in terms of European integration. They are talking about the Europe of fatherlands. A sovereignist approach is adopted here. And also, unless reform is possible, then they are even talking about a referendum on the future of the European Union and Germany's continuing membership. So, and I couldn't really believe my ears when I heard Alice Wiesel talking about a Eurasian Union, joining a Eurasian Union. So similar to the Eurasianists in Turkey, we see maybe a strengthening dimension also in Germany. And finally, when we look at this picture, I think the future of this Germany and the new coalition government will be very important also for the future of the EU, because the EU needs political leadership, and especially the more pro-Europe forces need leadership against the tide of growing populism and nationalism. Whether or not they will be successful is, of course, open to question. Despite the firewall against the AfD, we can say that their influence will be more and more felt, more and more, so they will have to be taken into consideration in German politics and, of course, in wider EU politics. As Mr. Heinrich talked about, the East-West divide is a major problem, as may be seen. This wall in the minds is still persisting. Among younger population groups between 18 and 24, we have seen the Linke and the AfD are leading the first two parties. So this also shows that the young people are also very much shifting away from the center, and they are looking for alternative solutions. So this will really change the face of German politics in the years to come. Green cause still matters. That's good, I think, although they are not prevailing or they have not been able to increase their votes. Still, there is a green consciousness or sensitivity. That's also good to hear. In terms of the living standards, accommodation crisis, law and order issues, I think they will continue to be important determinants of voter behavior. Merz aiming to reclaim German leadership at the heart of EU is very important, but will he have a free hand in a possible coalition? Will he be really strong enough in leading the coalition, also in leading the European Union? And we will see, of course, this radical change in the Atlanticist agenda, whether or not Europe will actually really be able to stand against this challenge and make the necessary decisions and make the necessary investments for Europe to be more independent and for claiming responsibility for its own future. And also relationship with China and climate issues will again very much be dependent on the nature of this coalition and their policy. So thank you very much. This was all from me.
Thank you very much, Çiğdem Hocam. So that has been great. Now that we have also an overview of the implications of the results of these elections for certain key German policies, including, of course, Germany's policies towards Europe and in Europe. So now, the Turkey issue has been mentioned in the context of migration. So I'm going to turn to Ebru Hoca, who will tell us a bit more about what these elections mean for Germany's relationship with Turkey. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I think great presentations, and I will try sort of connect my talking points, like to these, great elements mentioned already by my peers. Zeitenwende, watershed moment. I mean, it has become a buzzword, right, since 2022. But this is another Zeitenwende, right? I mean, in German domestic political landscape, but with wider repercussions also as a Zeitenwende, I would say also for EU, right, and beyond right now, even for Turkey, I would say. So what is the watershed moment for Germany, Europe, and beyond? First of all, as Heinrich mentioned, far right has surged to strongest post-war election result. That's very important. But on the other hand, I think we shouldn't forget about Sarah Wagenknecht. Because don't forget, when AfD actually entered the very first election, right, the federal election in 2013, they were also just below the threshold, right, with 4.7 of the total votes. So this shows actually how successful Sarah Wagenknecht has been. I mean, establishing the party 2024 in January, although there were pre-establishing movements, like the foundation in June 2023, and the very first test was actually the European elections, right? Which is actually a quite different kind of platform, and she was quite successful, unexpectedly there. In that sense, I think we shouldn't underestimate her, right? For the near future. And look at what has become from AfD, right, in that sense. And they are not that different from each other. Particularly, I'm right now looking at the European programs of both parties with a colleague, doing some coding, and so they are not that different from each other when it comes, for instance, in terms of European politics and policy preferences. The second thing, of course, I was also looking at the newspaper. I mean, the last, sort of like news, and one issue, of course, when we look particularly at the elections from the viewpoint of, electoral behavior, demographics, and so forth. Spiegel just wrote, without the elderly, Germany would not have had actually democratic center. So the younger, particularly below, like under 25, is voting for AfD, is voting for Sarah Wagenknecht. So this shows actually what kind of a future may be actually sort of like in the picture, let's say, for in the next elections, right? So I think this is something we have to be very careful about. Another thing, while of course right now SPD and CDU, they are very, very happy about, having this ability or possibility, and that was a very actually, let's say very, very, very, as the Germans say, knapp, right? Like last minute sort of like news, positive news for the Grand Coalition in order to finalize legislations, right? they need 2/3 of the parliament, and here actually they will probably need this support either from the left or from the AfD. Two political parties which are positioning completely on the extreme sides of the political spectrum. So this will make also the legislative procedures, right? It's not about only governing, but it's also about making legislations and so forth. Very, very difficult. So it's definitely a watershed moment, I think, for Zeitenwende, for Germany, possible emergence of a new political leadership figure in Europe, as Çiğdem mentioned, although with some caveats, right? With some limitations. I will also come to that. So I would like to actually point out 3 points, and particularly 3 likely trends I anticipate, and also risks for German foreign policy. Okay, I mean particular potential trends, but as well as risks when it comes to German foreign policy making. And I will make use of some concepts. The first concept is the concept of politicization, increasing politicization and domestication of Germany's foreign policy, because we are quite, let's say regularly and frequently and naturally talking about, about the fact that, or about the observation that the more the far right or the far left is actually successful, the more the center right or left is also going to lean towards right? But we are not really delving into the reasons as to why. And I think here the key concept or I think driver is the issue of politicization. And when we reflect this onto the German foreign policy, I think it's particularly about increasing politicization of international issues in Germany's domestic landscape or Germany's domestic arena. So what is politicization? Is of course there are 3 components: issue salience, so the visibility of issues. It doesn't matter whether the issue at hand is actually really important, but it depends on how the political party or the media or another actually, let's say, outlet actually emphasizes it or portrays it or frames it. The second component of politicization is the widening of actors that are involved with this debate or in this debate, right? So it goes beyond, let's say, technocrats. It goes beyond political elite, but it reaches mass politics, wider public, let's say mobilization attempts, street protests, right, civil society, and so forth, or business organizations, and so forth. And the third component of politicization is the polarization of the standpoint between these involved actors. And this is all these components we were able to see actually in this, German federal elections. And I think this election has been the election in which domestic actors have tend or were willing to be most involved in or with. For instance, just one day ahead of the elections, the counterpart of TÜSİAD, right? The popular TÜSİAD these days, the German BDI has actually also published a few tweets, right? Please vote for welfare. Please vote for actually investments and so forth. So there is increased, sort of involvement on the side of the German domestic actors. But the ones that are in politicized environments that are, of course, involving in mobilization sort of attempts are, of course, particularly the Eurosceptic, right? Anti-system parties. And when we look at the German foreign policy, the different components of German foreign policy, and it's not only about the hard components, right? It's not only about military, but it's also about, environment, trade, migration, and so forth. We see that they have actually they were quite successful in mobilizing the constituency when it comes to portray the policy preferences of the center mainstream with a negative tonality, right? When it comes to migration, when it comes to energy policies, when it comes to environment, and so forth, mobility, and also, you know, supranationalization, as you mentioned, right? You know, the Brussels technocrats, and so forth, and also the portrayal of, for instance, what is happening in Ukraine as a proxy war between Russia and USA, and so forth. So we are already observing this increasing politicization of international affairs in domestic political arena. And as actually, as the far right and the far left also are actually getting more and more stronger, we can also expect the same pattern continuing in the post-election era. So that means at the time when we are talking about a possible new German leadership, right, or emergence of a new leadership figure in the EU and beyond, particularly amidst this transatlantic turmoil or disruption. So Germany, as Germany is trying to look outward, it will also need to look inward, right? So Germany's and the German government's decisions are going to also be impacted by increasing politicization, right, of particular elements of foreign policy making, both soft elements as well as hard elements. So I think this will be a huge challenge for German foreign policy making. So because we are always talking about this emergence of this leadership figure, right? You know, the rise of this leadership figure, but and we are talking about this outward-looking Germany, that is very positive sort of like picture or anticipation, but we are forgetting about what is happening in the domestic landscape, this issue of politicization. So as Germany wants to take over a leadership role in Europe and beyond and become more outward-looking, it will also increasingly need to take domestic factors into consideration. So domestic politicization, as we know from EU studies, European studies, but also IR, is providing actually or bringing about a constraining dissensus, right, on European integration or international cooperation between states. That means my anticipation is when it comes to German foreign policy and impact on EU and European integration, there will be actually, let's say, a growing pattern or trend towards differentiated integration because of this politicization, issue-specific politicization of international issues or topics in the German domestic political landscape. So this is also, I think, something we have to take into consideration when we talk about security and defense, right? You know, Friedrich Merz, one of the probably key elements, right, you know, of its campaign and also of its discourse yesterday, you know, after the elections, putting emphasis on security and defense, a common Europe, a stronger Europe, but this may also be kidnapped by the issue of politicization, domestic politicization. The second point I would like to underline or anticipate as a trend, as a possible trend, and I think we have already seen many examples of this, is increasing pragmatism and transactionalism in German foreign policy making. You know, this transactional foreign policy approach that is, you know, interest-driven, strategic, business-like exchanges, short-term, and does not that much rely on normative considerations, but rather this liquid alliances, right? Ad hoc liquid alliances. And we have already observed these strong features, transactional features in German foreign policy making during the Merkel and Scholz eras, particularly vis-a-vis Turkey, right? When it comes to the making of the EU-Turkey refugee deal, right? When it comes to the solution or partial solution of the Eastern Mediterranean crisis, there was always what I call a transactional conditionality in the making. Not a normative conditionality vis-a-vis Turkey, but rather a transactional conditionality in the making, meaning, you know, better relations and cooperation and with Turkey and material incentives that are going to be provided to Turkey were not actually dependent on Turkey's normative evolvement or evolution, but rather on Turkey's cooperation in line with the strategic interests of the European Union, right? So in that sense, I expect actually increasing transactionalism and pragmatism, not only vis-a-vis Turkey, but also other key third countries in this in this emerging international order, increasingly driven by multipolarization, right? On the one hand, there are this growing set of interdependencies between Germany, not only Turkey, but also other emerging, powers, be it emerging or middle power or regional power. But on the other hand, and there is this, need to find common solutions, sometimes ad hoc solutions to joint problems. But on the other hand, there is also this growing divergence of, between, Germany and these partners when it comes particularly to normative preferences. So transactionalism is probably unavoidable, and we are going to talk also about probably in the near future about other, let's say, concepts which Germany and other important powers may probably utilize outside EU's institutional framework, such as unilateralism, club governance, right? These kind of concepts, I think, will become increasingly important. And we have seen the first signs, right, when it comes to transactionalism, and Friedrich Merz's preferences vis-a-vis Turkey. He has given just before the elections a few interviews. Not only Friedrich Merz, but also his close, sort of colleagues, right? To the Turkish Anadolu Agency, saying that, Turkey is quite needed in this evolving geopolitical environment. I mean, based on joint interests, we have to deepen our relationship. So transactionalism in EU-Turkey relations and German-Turkish relations are in the making, but the real challenge for Germany, I think, will it be a completely dry, pure transactionalism that does not involve any kind of norms, right? Because at the end of the day, transactionalism is based on liquid and ad hoc and temporary alliances, right? It's not a short, long-term solution. So it provides actually the partners with a sort of reciprocal short-term solution, but at the end of the day, when there is no reciprocity anymore, then the alliance fails. So that's why we call it liquid alliances. So the real challenge for Germany and the EU will be how to create a kind of a transactional relationship, since it is these days unavoidable, but that is both normative and interest-driven at the same time. So I think that will be a real challenge. Another point, maybe also connected to that, is of course what has been written in the coalition or election program of the Christian Democrats. That's something new. Okay, that's really something new. Turkey continues to be a strategically important partner for Europe. We regret that it is currently moving away from the values. This has been already written also in the former programs. But Turkey, therefore, will not be able to join the European Union. For the first time, I think, in the history of a, let's say, political party program or election program, we explicitly actually read that their perspective is that Turkey is not going to be definitely able to join the European Union, and instead of that, there is actually the notion of strategic partnership, deepening of the partnership. This is actually different than the 2021 CDU program, where actually it says Turkey's full membership in the EU will not happen during our term, so in the next 4 to 5 years. So this is different than today's discourse. I mean, I think CDU has officially or de facto closed the gap, the door to Turkey's EU membership. the same is, but also true for the Social Democrats, by the way, which is very interesting. When you look at the party election program you see a lot about enlargement is very important for the future of the EU, rule of law, blah, blah, blah, blah, but then emphasis on Western Balkans, right? Emphasis on Ukraine, emphasis on Moldova, but even on Georgia, despite, the emphasis on backsliding, there is nothing about Turkey, not even one single keyword, okay? And this is different than the SPD of 2021, when it said there's a lot of concern about the course of the Turkish government, about rule of law, blah, blah, blah, blah, but intensified EU-Turkey dialogue is important. I mean, there is not even an emphasis on that in the Social Democratic right now election program, which is, I think, a new Zeitenwende when it comes to EU-German-Turkish relations. So, last point, as already mentioned by Çiğdem, leadership role in Europe. Of course, we have seen the first signs that Merz is very much willing to take over this new leadership role, in the post-Merkel era, where we actually witnessed a complete vacuum, right? During the Scholz era, and she also mentioned, rightfully, to what extent they will get along, right? Ursula von der Leyen and Merz. One issue is also the institutional, I think, framework or the institutional, let's say, aspect of the relationship. So during the Scholz era, I think European Council's effectiveness and also European Council's importance or role as a crisis manager has decreased, and it has been gradually transferred to European Commission. And actually, during the Merkel era, European Council was actually de facto and de jure crisis manager of the European Union, with the refugee deal, with Brexit, with Ukraine 2014, and so forth. But during the Scholz era, with COVID, with next generation EU, digitalization and so forth. So I don't know whether, Ursula von der Leyen will be willing to give this, authority and these competences she has taken over. I will stay at the end of today. One last point, in terms of a recommendation, because I think as think tanks and academics, we should also make some recommendations. When we look at this transactional relationship, rules-based, or the question of rules-based EU-Turkey relationship, I think one thing we should really push forward during this term, and also given the fact that Merz is right now and CDU, according to the program, are really seeking to diversify their export partners, right? In view of the fact that exports to China are gradually decreasing, I think the modernization of the EU-Turkey customs union, I think this is something that could be really pushed forward during the Merz era. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, finally, quite a few actually of the speakers, I think almost all of the speakers have raised the climate issue in one way or another. And of course, Germany is at the forefront of the climate agenda in Europe and maybe, among the world as well. So what will this new coalition mean for climate policy, Johanna? Can we expect some regression maybe? Or, are they going to stay the course with the green agenda? So, floor is yours.
Okay, I hope I'm understandable. Thank you very much for all these very interesting wrap-ups. I hope I can now raise your interest for the climate topics after we heard about all these issues and topics that are going on in Germany. But yeah, as we all know, climate policy is not just about reducing emissions. It is more far-reaching. It has implications on the economy, on the society, and on global security. Like, for example, when we look at Russia and the dependencies on Russia regarding the gas, renewable energies can help us getting more independence from external powers. And also, when we look at the German industry, it's like mostly important now to have like a very clear climate strategy so that the industry knows in which direction to develop. Yeah, just so far, before I dive deeper into the election implications on climate politics, I wanted to quickly look on one side note. I'm from Berlin-Neukölln, and in Berlin-Neukölln, Ferhat Kocak, he's a Turkish-German from the left party, won very high, like he got the direct mandate in Berlin-Neukölln. Just as a side note, as I thought maybe it's of interest for you. Yeah, so as we heard before, Germany is pursuing one of Europe's most ambitious climate politics. It is aiming to reach net zero by 2045, which is 5 years earlier than the EU's target. And now we have the situation with the economic stagnation that like a stagnation even in traditionally strong industries like the automotive industry in Germany. This has fueled support for anti-green parties like the far-right AfD and the left-wing BSW. So the key question now is how the new government will navigate this critical phase in Germany's climate transition and how they can balance voters' concerns while maintaining momentum in its climate action. So let us look at the party's position on 10 key topics. First, more the general climate goals. Most of the parties recognize a human-caused climate crisis as it is described by science, except for the AfD. And also most of the parties want to hold on to the German net zero emission target by 2045, as set in the Federal Climate Change Act from 2019. This as a basis, let us look at the energy policy now. Most of the parties describe in their election programs the support and the expansion of renewable energies, where we are like now at almost 60% renewable energy in Germany. By 2030, we want to reach 100%. And I want to do like another little excursion here, again, looking at the gas from Russia, because I thought it could be of interest here. Germany stopped getting gas as a war sanction through the Nord Stream pipeline in 2022. And now the question appears if Germany will reapproach getting gas from Russia after a peace treaty with Ukraine. But right now, all big parties, except for the BSW and the AfD, are against importing gas from Russia. And this has climate as well as security reasons. And most parties are convinced that Germany can do it with own renewable energies. Looking at the Building Energy Act, the debate on climate neutral heating systems in Germany and private buildings in the last year did hurt the climate policy support a lot. And the CDU, there was like a big dispute about this, and the CDU now argues for a more market-based, technology-neutral approach to climate policy, and they want to cancel the heating law. Let's go one further to the coal exit. Germany plans to exit coal by 2038, and there are now efforts from the Green and the left to bring this date even forward to 2030. But the CDU wants to stick to the 2038 exit plan. So let's see where the parties can find a solution. Nuclear power, there remained a lot of disagreement about the role of nuclear power. And the CDU shows some interest in restarting the country's nuclear power plants right now. And the SPD and also the Greens, they call this idea too expensive and impractical, and they express a commitment to reaching climate neutrality without nuclear power. Okay, let's go to the last third of the table. Let's look at the car industry and the mobility sector in Germany. We already heard that from 2035 onwards, new cars and vans in the EU must have zero CO2 emissions. And if manufacturers exceed their emission target, there will be a penalty for those. The CDU and the SPD, they support the EU emission limit for cars and vans, but they want to remove the penalty for manufacturers. So there will be discussions going on regarding the EU fleet emission targets. The EU is set also to ban new combustion engines after 2035 on top of the EU fleet emission standards. Some parties now advocate for the continued use of e-fuels, so that there's like still the allowance to produce combustion engines. But e-fuels in cars remain controversial. They are expensive, they are ineffective, and they are mainly needed for aviation and shipping. Yet some parties like the CDU and the FDP want to keep them for cars, and thus they want to cancel the combustion engine car ban. Discussions ongoing. At this point, I want to take like a very brief look at the German car industry. Why is the German car industry in such a big crisis? In the last year, there was a lot of uncertainty about the future direction, partly because of the debates of the future of combustion engines. Like there was like such a big insecurity. Can we continue with the combustion engines or not? And this slowed down the progress in e-mobility. And before, Germany excelled in producing the complex combustion engines, but producing electric motors is more simple, and the international competition intensified. And Germany is not like in this very good position to produce the combustion engines, and Chinese electric vehicles are cheaper, highly innovative, and of high quality. So what are the options now for the German car industry? Like sticking with combustion engines and e-fuels. This is kind of unlikely, as China, once a key market for the German cars, is moving away from those. So there won't be a market for the German combustion engines anymore. And continuing with e-fuels could also confuse the consumers in Germany and could like weaken the efforts on electric vehicles in Germany. So alternative strategies could include purchase incentives for cars from Germany and the EU, and lowering electricity costs to boost the competitiveness, to boost the international competitiveness. Yes, so far on the 10 key topics. What to expect now generally from the new government? The CDU, as I mentioned before, rather wants to take a more ideology-free, technology-neutral and market-based climate protection, whereas the SPD and also the Greens want a mix of regulatory law, also market incentives like emission trading, and they emphasize social justice instruments combined with climate protection to relieve vulnerable households and to get support for climate protection. Looking ahead now, what should be the key priorities for an effective climate policy in Germany according to experts? First of all, sticking to the Federal Climate Change Act from 2019. This is like our core climate policy framework in Germany. And yeah, sticking to what is written in there is like very important. And this would especially mean emission reduction in the building and transport sector, which are like the so-called problem sectors, because their emission reductions were not enough in the last years. Yeah. Then another big point when looking ahead is a just transition, considering social and economic impacts of climate policies, ensuring the support for vulnerable households to get the support for climate protection. And above that, as mentioned before, we would need like a very coherent strategy, because the industry in Germany, they need a clear framework for their transformation. They're like begging the politics like to get like a clear climate framework to know where the transformation is going. And the reform of the debt brake could also help climate policies to finance infrastructure and decarbonization. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna, for this great overview on what these elections mean for Germany's climate policy. Now, we have a great crowd, so I would like to open the debate now to the audience, to the floor, and have your comments and questions to the panel. And if you could also identify yourself. Ahmet Hocam. You don't need to identify yourself, but...
But still do. I mean.
Thank you. It's it's the richest post-election analysis I've heard in my life. I was just about to say, slip of the tongue, richest post-mortem, but it is not post-mortem. It is not post-mortem. There are, as we said, there are glimmers of hope, particularly a coalition of two parties which will be more stable than what we have experienced. But my first question is, Mr. Ambassador, there is, and even after the election, a continuous support for AfD from Washington, and particularly a non-elected, non-certified, federally appointed person congratulating. Now, has this affected the voter decision in Germany? I do not see that it has, maybe, but normally one would expect that such a blatant interference in an election process from outside, a blatant one, would have an effect. My second question is, and I think Ebru mentioned it, but your very detailed policy options that would come out of this election result. My question is that what Germany would do as a middle power. That rang a bell because Germany, if Germany is the locomotive of the European Union, how do we define the European Union? I don't think we should define the European Union as a middle power, but it certainly is not a destructive power like China or the United States. Maybe the recent investments in defense might change the picture. But the other side, it is a very important economic power. The EU is a very important economic power. So I would like to hear your interpretation about what is the likely outcome of a policy towards China. It would be and you mentioned this, but a clear, because when we're talking about the external thing, what has happened is what is most disorienting for us in this context is the Washington interference. I mean, it came with a hammer right on everybody's head, and so consequently, the other important implication, and China has a very long a plan, a century plan to sort of make a contiguous economic area across the supercontinent. How would Germany particularly and Western Europe and Brussels might react to that? I have one more question, and that is, when we look at who really voted for AFD, you have a very large group that voter that you showed, very large group of what we would call sourpusses. I mean, either unemployed or those that are employed, but they want a greater salary or better living standard and so on. There has been, and I try to follow it as much as I can, there has been recently a great deal of literature written on East Germany. And some of it is very much complaining about the effect of West German superiority. Some of it is trying to explain this. But essentially, we have a party that has got 1 in 5 votes. That is, that shows some kind of negative attitude towards the system. Where would this go? What is, you mentioned this, but I'm very interested. Would this ebb if there are, because a number of people, I've been going to Germany for a number of decades, and I see more and more people, younger people, not working and living on this. So living on state help, extended studentship until you're 35, and then you give up getting a profession. Would this lead to a further alienation from the system? That would be the danger that I would expect. Or if there is a glimmer of hope, for example, by fuel prices coming down, energy prices coming down, there would be an improvement in the alignment of the voter with the system. Thank you. I've talked too much.
Thank you very much, Ahmet. And I think I've seen a couple of hands. Gentleman at the back.
Hello. My name is Khalid, South Asian, but living here in Istanbul. I have 2 questions. One is the rise of AFD, and this election brings home the point of a rupture in the politics of Europe, and Germany perhaps is a test case in that aspect. How will this election and the rise of AFD determine Germany's approach to the international order, the post-war international order, particularly on the pressing issues of international law, trade, and things that basically, or institutions, global institutions that really brought about some degree of stability in the world post-war. The second is more specific to Turkey, given the rupture that there is in Europe and a rupture that we see between the Europe and the United States now. How plausible or feasible or logical does Turkey's drift towards other multilateral institutions such as BRICS? How plausible does it become? Should Turkey, perhaps a provocative question, should Turkey give up on its European aspirations and try to find an arrangement with another club of middle powers? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, the gentleman I see. I'm just going to collect another one and then I'll turn to the panel. Yeah.
I'm Özgün, and I want to talk about. Is it working? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Özgün. Thank you very much for the presentations. Actually, I have two questions, and one of them is how migration and refugee crisis affect these results? Because, on the other hand, I think Europe is not controlling the migration crisis anymore because of the safety issues, especially migrants from some specific geographies. They are acting like they don't have to follow any rules. And it may be personal, and you can see that, okay, in every society, there may be some rotten apples. It's not explaining the situation anymore. And I want to ask that. The second one, comparing with the other European countries like France, like Italy, our European dream is collapsing, or we are joining a new European era? Because that's, especially comparing with the European United Europe dream, this is not clear situation. And in the yesterday's elections, it's also, there may be another Berlin Wall will build up because of that results, especially some part AfD results, AfD voters are very much. I want to ask that. And Turkish voters in Germany, mostly depending on the Kreuzberg results, and they are voting left parties. But most of them, we know that they also support current government in Turkey. How you explain this situation also? Thank you.
Lots of questions there. And then finally, I see another hand at the very back. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Uğurcan. So my question is about the last appeal of TÜSİAD and its relation with the declining, industrial sector in Germany. So to what extent the industrialization activities in Germany, which is reflected on the also Turkish economy and also on TÜSİAD activities, to what extent the appeal of TÜSİAD would be related with the declining German industry, and also what will be the future prospect for the CDU on the economic relationship with Turkey? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to collect, and then I'll turn in a few minutes because we're already.
Thank you so much for the presentations. I'm Zeynep from the Economic Development Foundation. I just wondered that...
If you could speak up a little bit, please.
Sorry. I'm Zeynep from Economic Development Foundation. My question is about the division between STU and SPD. There are lots of divisions between them in terms of especially the modern citizenship legislation, migration, especially the social benefits. Mars has also signaled that they can cut the social benefits to create another resource for the country's economy, but it was another major crisis reason between the CDU and FDP. The coalition negotiations will come, and I wonder that how these two parts can bring together their policies to reach an agreement, the coalition agreement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, and these two gentlemen, and that's going to be final. Yeah. Yes.
This is more for Johanna Wietschel. General for everyone. I'm coming from northern Italy, and we look with a lot of attention election in Germany because thank you. Our industry are quite working in symbiosis with Germany, and I have to say, for the first time, I saw people, workers, concerned about how is going the industry in Germany, because if they are not working, we are not working. And I mean, about climate, especially and nuclear, I was wondering so much because I thought CSU was quite on the deal of nuclear and everything. But do you think that if there will be a future economic crisis, both for Germany and with a cascade effect for Europe, all the framework to reach in 2035 the European design level or other climate-related framework could be more flexible to prevent any, I mean, I don't want to be catastrophic, but further or bigger, not just German, but European economic crisis? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question from the gentleman.
Hi, I'm Onur, thank you. The question I wanted to ask about was industrial policy, especially with the AfD. So again, it was mentioned that there seems to be still a wall in the mind with East Germany and West Germany. But the curious thing is, you know, the big issues are high energy prices and not necessarily the downfall, but the precarity of industry. But the region that is voting for low energy prices is the region that doesn't have much industry, which is East Germany, where it's been closed down for some time. And we see, for instance, with Le Pen in France, that her, you know, populist nationalist program has a big economic component. You know, she's a protectionist. Similarly, in the United States, not as cogent and coherent a program, but, you know, again, the External Revenue Service. So we're going to impose tariffs. What is the relationship of the AfD, and why isn't it that people aren't investing so much into Eastern Germany? Because if I was trying to win votes in Eastern Germany, the first thing I would try to do is say, you know, I'm going to go to the European Commission, I'm going to get a subsidy, you know, to upgrade the docks in Rostock so that they're like Gdansk, for instance, or something like that. So just why? Thank you.
Okay, I think I can now turn to the floor. There are so many questions, so you can choose the ones that you feel most comfortable responding to in a few minutes each, because we're already way past our time, but we started a bit late, which is why it's okay. So we'll start with you, please. No, I think you already have it on.
Okay. Well, we all expected intervention by Russia into our elections, but not from the US. So this was really a big negative surprise. Well, we have in Germany traditionally anti-Americanism on the left, but also on the right. It goes back to Oswald Spengler and very much into German history, and so it was a bit of a surprise that Musk certainly didn't know what about the program of the AfD. So, for example, that there are many in the AfD who are critical vis-à-vis the US. Maybe not as critical vis-à-vis Trump and vis-à-vis Biden. And well, it's difficult to say what kind of effect this has had, because there was no this type question after the polls after voting. So there's only speculation. The AfD was around 21-22% already in November, so they didn't grow. So you can make the point. Well, it hasn't had an effect, at least on the AfD, but it might have had an effect on the left, because one reason many are giving for the surprising rise of the left is that they would be the real firewall against the AfD. And if you look at when the rise of the left started, it was after the vote in the parliament by Friedrich Merz, supported by the AfD, which led to those demonstrations in many cities, and this has certainly helped the left. It hasn't helped really the Greens, and Habib made the point last night that he could not pick this up as the leftists could, because he didn't want to jeopardize a possible cooperation after the election, and this was a major point he made last night. So, but there's a lot of speculation in that. I will only make one other point and leave the rest to you. Well, we have had a huge inflow of investments into the eastern part of Germany. I would like to remind you to the flourishing landscapes of Helmut Kohl. Well, you can see them in Dresden, in Leipzig, not necessarily in Rostock, you're right. But the shipbuilding has also problems in Kiel and in Bremerhaven and Hamburg. So there is another problem for that. Another problem is in the East that many of the skilled workers left. So the former GDR has lost at least 2 million people, and all skilled ones, and most, there's even more female than male. And it's another reason given for the upswing of the AfD, the lack of women, of young women, particularly in the countryside in Eastern Germany. It was basically in the countryside where, in the smaller cities where the AfD really has grown. I gave the example of Görlitz, nearly 50%, and not the cities like Dresden and Leipzig, where you had demonstrations all the time against the AfD. So, one would think that economic prosperity would lead to voting for center parties, but there are other variables which are stronger. I stop here because I'm also entering the field of speculation now.
I can continue with the field of speculation. I mean, could there be like a decline in AfD in horizon, right? When we look at the opinion polls, particularly a few days ahead of the elections, what we have seen is there are, I think, two important, issues for the German domestic constituency. That is, the first one was migration, right? It tripled actually when we compared it with 2021, and the second one was economy. So particularly, I would say migration, of course, closely linked to identity politics, and there AfD is very, very successful, right? The politicization, and that is also again, identity politics-driven politicization of the issue of migration. So in that sense, it will also depend, I think, on Germany's, let's say, handling of the migration governance. I mean, also alongside externalization of migration governance, I think internal solutions, to migration will be very important. I think another issue at stake is, and also how Senem works a lot on that, the fluidity of identity, the identity constructs. Interestingly, I think in the next days we are going to be able to hear learn about the statistics and data about how the Turks have voted, the Germans of Turkish origin, you may say, or German Turks. But we hear, I mean, is also like friends who have been there, in Berlin, etc., ahead of the elections. There's a growing trend also among young Turks, in terms of voting for AfD, right, and for CDU. So this is a new trend, and again, this also shows how identity is fluid, right? The identities, the constructs. that they perceive the other migrants and you know, people of, you know, foreign origin, like, you know, such as Syrians, Afghans, and so forth, as the new sort of diaspora. So this is also, I think, a different, you know, issue to tackle, you know, this identity politics, I think. And maybe one last thing about, you know, Christian Democratic Union, how it would approach Turkey. In terms of economy, I think what Turkey should push for is the customs union. I think there we have, I think, high stakes, but also I think high probability, I think, when it comes to, you know, better partnership in this current, you know, sort of like context. But in terms of, you know, I think particularly government near, you know, academics are providing us with a quite positive picture when it comes to post-election Germany and its relationship with Turkey, particularly the emphasis of Mer's emphasis on security and defense. Of course, Turkey's geostrategic added value in the current context, but we shouldn't forget, I mean, Meltem Hocam works on that a lot, the differentiated integration and the 5% of alignment, right? Rate 7 right now, 7 in terms of the EU, Turkey's alignment with the, you know, statements of the High Representative, right? You know, when it comes to, you know, security and defense policy. So it's not guaranteed at the end of the day. So in that sense, I think also in that sort of compartment, I expect a lot of a huge roller coaster ride. I think this transactionalism is going to be is there to stay, but it's also going to also generate some roller coaster ride, I think, in the EU-Turkey relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regarding the relationship with China, I think that in this new period, maybe the EU and China may find more common ground in sort of trying to fill the vacuum which is left by the United States, especially in the upholding of international institutions, free trade principles, etc. However, of course, I think in the recent period, the EU has felt pressure from the United States not to be too sort of cozy with China and to implement a more hostile approach towards China. But I think now with this new turn of events under Trump, they will no longer feel the need to follow the United States leadership. So they will feel maybe more independent in forging a closer relationship with China. However, there are difficulties because we also know that China has a quite aggressive trade policy, and recently there was a debate about the tariffs against electric vehicles, which was, I think, opposed by Germany, but still the decision was adopted. So there will be some problems in that regard because maybe the EU will want to have more access to the Chinese market, and which may be quite difficult. Maybe they can cooperate on certain global issues regarding trade or energy or other issues. However, in areas like renewable energy or electric cars, there may be more competition with Europe, so that may prove to be a problem. So we will have to see. Regarding the Turkey-EU relationship, I agree. And because, I mean, as we have this transformation in the European market, our relationship has to also transform. And I think the recent initiative by TÜSİAD was also related with that we are losing on the new technologies, that Turkey is very slow to make this transition to new technologies. And in order to especially modernize our relationship with the EU, to draw more capital, more investment from the EU, of course, Turkey has to maybe also modernize its political system. Rule of law should be, again, a priority. But what we see in Turkey is a opposite trend, that rather than trying to keep up with EU reforms, we see a further sort of step towards a more authoritarian maybe approach. So it's very difficult to get over that. I mean, of course, I mean, we will have to propagate for the modernization of the customs union, which may seem the most sort of probable approach, but still we have the Cyprus issue as an obstacle, and also these Court of Human Rights decisions which are not being implemented, etc. So they will still, I mean, how they will will be overcome is still a question mark. But if we cannot really upgrade this relationship with the EU, then of course there will be a maybe push towards different alliances, maybe BRICS, etc. Turkey will be maybe, as the EU perspective becomes less and less probable, then maybe there will be a push to find some alternatives, which may not be likely in the near future, but still I think we will go in that direction, unless something drastic takes place, let's say. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one thing to add to you, Ebru, regarding migrants in Germany voting the AfD. Like the AfD was doing advertisement on social media, TikTok, etc., telling you migrants you should vote for the AfD because if there come more migrants, then you are the ones who will lose the jobs. Like that was their social media branding, their advertisement among migrants in Germany, and at the same time they were saying, oh, we need remigration in Germany. So it was like just such a paradox situation, and such a paradox statements the AfD made. Just on this, and I want to make two more points. One regarding the China-German industry relations, especially like with my perspective on the automotive industry. I mean, we kind of have to accept that that China is far ahead regarding the e-mobility, the electric vehicles that are very innovative, very cheap. They have like the small electric vehicles. We didn't produce those small electric vehicles in Germany, which we would need for a transformation, because like with the small electric vehicles you can reach more people. The range of smaller cars is more wide than the one of electric SUVs, and the German car industry, like there were wrong management decisions in the last years, and now we are like we fell behind. But like still, I think we have to look now on the value chain and look where we can work together with China, where we can like import maybe parts that are produced better or cheaper in China. We need like this industrial cooperation here now, while keeping environmental standards. Like this is, yeah. I mean, we have climate and environmental goals, and when we import products, they should like. They should keep those environmental standards. And what we should do for the German industry is lowering the energy costs, like for making production more competitive, and also like this is one point, and also making electric vehicles more attractive. Like so, I think most of the parties are pro lowering energy costs and lowering the network charges. And yeah, regarding the tolls and tariffs on cars from China, yeah, I think like it's the automotive industry itself in Germany that are against those tolls because or tariffs, because they are affected by those tariffs, because they partly produce in China, and their products will become more expensive in Germany. So I don't know if this is the solution to boost the German industry. What could be a boost are purchase incentives for German or European cars, like yeah, like bonus, like some bonus system for those cars. In the best case, connected also like to some social strategy, but I think this is going too deep here. And one last point on the economic crisis in Germany, which could have cascade effects in Europe. Again, here my focus is the automotive industry, and yeah, I think I already made some points here. I think the automotive industry right now needs like a very clear framework and a clear direction where to go, and I think then there is a way, because like especially when we look at AI in the automotive sector, we need this in Germany. We need automotive cars in Germany, and there are some firms in Germany that are working on automotive cars and automotive shuttles. We especially need those in Germany, because we don't have enough driving stuff for public transport, and if we want to expand the public transport in Germany, then we need autonomous shuttles, especially in the urban areas, to be able to provide the public transport. So yeah, I think the industry has to change direction. Like the combustion engine, as I said it before, is not really a solution. The market is not there anymore. But I see a big chance in the autonomous vehicles for the German industry. I think I make a point here.
Well, I think that's been a fascinating discussion. I'd like to, first of all, of course, take the panelists for their great contributions. Thank you so much. And I'd like to take, this opportunity to say thank you to all of you who made it today this afternoon and contributed to a wonderful discussion. So we're going to have more and more events, of course, on Germany, Europe, Turkey, all around climate, migration, and all kinds of different policy areas in the coming months. And hopefully we'll see you there in those events as well. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.